Wow, Amsterdam. So many people. That's brilliant. Well, my name is Stefania Barbaglio. I host a podcast called the FinancialFox. You should all subscribe and watch my video. And then I've been in the Bitcoin space for over 10 years and in capital markets for over 15 years. So obviously I've been dealing with many investors, and Bitcoin has become the apex assets for corporation, for investors, and that's what we are going to be discussing today. How do you build wealth strategy using Bitcoin, really? So maybe we can start with like a quick introduction about, all my amazing panelists. And when did you get in Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin as an asset to build your career with, to develop, what you're doing, your business?
Well,
Hunter?
thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Hunter Albright. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Salt Lending. I got into Bitcoin in 2017 after having spent several decades in traditional finance and excited by the opportunities that Bitcoin really gives all of us. I look at Bitcoin as an asset class that is really helping democratize wealth building, and excited to be on the panel today.
Yeah, I'm Chris. I'm from Germany. I run Seedor, where we do self-custody, Scarsity, where we do Bitcoin inheritance. And with Bitsurance, we founded the very first insurance for Bitcoin and self-custody.
My name is Jim Crider. I'm from the US. I own a financial planning company helping people with wealth management, all things money, from managing investments, Bitcoin, custody, tax planning, estate planning, essentially help people articulate what's important in life and then align their assets with what they say is valuable to them.
Great. I'm going to go back to my question because you really didn't answer. So why Bitcoin? What is the main risk to financial freedom, and what Bitcoin represents as a solution?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it comes down to three things. First is really sort of monetary protection in terms of the scarcity aspect and the utility that it is to protect against debasement and inflation and all of those sort of monetary aspects that are attracted to. Second is the utility. It's an asset class that has utility beyond just ownership. And then the third one for me is really sort of the sovereignty around it, that it's portable, it's censorship resistant, and the divisibility, especially from a generational wealth perspective, I think is a really attractive asset for a longer time horizon.
Yeah, I mean, how do you build wealth without Bitcoin is the question for me. Bitcoin, as opposed to like gold, is scarce, but it's difficult to self-verify, difficult to portable. Fiat it's portable, but like all the other properties are not that great to store wealth, and you will constantly be debased. And Bitcoin, as you said, gives you sovereignty. It is self-verifiable. That is the new thing. You can check that is real Bitcoin at any point. If you run your own node, you can audit all of the Bitcoin. You know exactly the amount. And that is a very asymmetric bet.
I first come to understand what Bitcoin is and why it's important in March of 2020. When the government announced that they would begin printing money to give out in the U.S. For COVID relief. And at that moment, I realized that the government should not be able to arbitrarily create money, and therefore there should be a better form of money. And I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin's best form of money that's ever been discovered or created, and that we needed to separate money from the state in order to retain a sound monetary platform and break away from the further monetization of all types of assets that we're seeing right now.
Right, so we kind of established that Bitcoin is a great asset to build wealth. Now, I want to go back to one point about Bitcoin that is important to highlight, which is volatility. Volatility is vitality, but at the same time is challenging if you are an investor, because you need to have a structure in place, a portfolio in place that doesn't force you to sell your Bitcoin. So can you walk me through the way that you think about building up psychological and also financial resilience system for investor, or if you are building portfolio for certain type of investor, or even as an individual investor as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic and one that is probably one of the biggest barriers to getting more people to think about Bitcoin as a wealth building asset. And I think it comes down to a couple of key points. One is mental or sort of psychological resilience. So really believing in the asset class and learning more about the fundamentals and the foundation of Bitcoin and why so many people are excited about it. Second one is a financial resiliency. And I think for me, that's like, how do you think about it, Bitcoin within your portfolio? And the one thing I know that zero is the wrong number in terms of how much you should have, but there should be a balance that aligns to your risk profile and your risk preferences. And the third one is sort of structural resiliency. And this gets into what some of these guys are talking about today is one, what are you thinking about how you pass it on in terms of should it be wrapped in a trust? Should it, what is the custody management and what might be insurance protection that wraps around it? And I think the resiliency is, for me, is a combination of learning about all those three different elements and how you as an individual or family office or even a corporation want to think about it over the long term.
Yes, you said volatility is vitality. To quote Michael Saylor, something that's dead does not have volatility. Volatility is the market discovering truth in real time, and it's going down further. You see Bitcoin as an asset develops. So yeah, psychologically, if you understand that, there's no problem. From a structural perspective, have self-custody systems that also account for your own mortality. I always say there's like two things in life that are true. There's never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin, and your last shirt will not have a wallet. So have a plan, talk to your family, figure out a way to have the inheritance solved of Bitcoin. And I think these are the next steps. Bitcoin is currently adopted by mostly younger people, but eventually we all will have to give the Bitcoin to the next of kin. And those are conversations to be had.
Volatility is only an issue in two domains. One, if you don't have a depth of understanding of the asset that you own, therefore you're shaken out of your conviction during a time of high volatility. Two, if you have not addressed your risk capacity. I think too many people lean into risk tolerance, which is your ability to stomach volatility in your portfolio. That's not that important. That's based on emotions, and it's goofy to allow your emotions to dictate your portfolio. So rather than leaning on risk tolerance, you lean into risk capacity. How much volatility can your life, your portfolio sustain? And that's why I've taken a lot of flack of this over the years to make sure that you do retain some sort of liquid cash portfolio. And I'll say that because I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I say that because I want to make sure that you are protecting your Bitcoin during drawdowns. So you want to make sure that you have insurance. Bitcoin is insurance against fiat, but then fiat can be insurance against temporary drawdowns of Bitcoin's price. So making sure you understand each role that each asset should play in your total financial life.
How do you think about leveraging your Bitcoin portfolio to create cash and revenue or liquidity that you can use, for example, to pay something? Everybody needs them at some point, to buy a house or have some big expenses. And then what do? If you don't have enough cash, enough stable coin, then you might, you maybe have thought about leveraging your Bitcoin and then having something that comes in that you could perhaps use for those kind of expenses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point Jim was bringing up earlier about understanding how much short-term cash you have or you need allow you to time horizon to have a balanced perspective around the volatility of Bitcoin is important. At Salt Lending, we help people with liquidity, right? When you think about liquidity around Bitcoin, you've got two options. You can sell it, which none of us really want to be doing, and you don't want to
sell your Bitcoin,
and you don't want to be forced into it. And then the other option is to borrow against it. And what we see is how people are using Bitcoin and using leverage against it. One is for tactical liquidity, like what short-term needs. I might have an expense, want to take a dream vacation. We've had a customer adopt a child using the liquidity that they were able to get about their Bitcoin. The second type is really around structural liquidity. Think about this around income replacement. You might be having income supplement so you don't have to work full-time, or it might be full-on retirement, and thinking about how you do that. And then the last one is strategic liquidity, where you're going to reinvest. And that's important because I think there's a big shift now of people trying to go from what I view as labor-based income to asset-based income. And to really create generational wealth, you've got to create asset-based income, both for you and future generations to live off of. And leverage is a part of that, and to encourage people to start small, understand what margin calls are, understand the protections that providers help you with in terms of protecting the downside, but become more comfortable with it before you have higher loan-to-value ratios or leverage more of your portfolio for liquidity purposes.
It's such a great point about the asset. Having us thinking about strategy where you actually have got assets for a long-term wealth creation.
Yeah, I agree. A little controversial statement. I always say the last resort is collateralization of your Bitcoin if it's for a consumption purpose. Like I would use it sparingly. I would use like a lending platform if I have like a productive use, if I think my company can outperform Bitcoin. I would not like go on a lavish vacation and take a loan out for Bitcoin on that.
I think it's an important point to do your diligence on who you're borrowing from and why. Salt lending's been around since 2016. I think we've learned a lot of hard knocks in terms of the ups and downs. And fundamentally, we've worked on doing a couple things. One, first of all, we don't rehypothecate. Your collateral goes against your loan, full stop. Secondly, we do everything we can to make sure your Bitcoin stays your Bitcoin. Salt learned, through the volatility of the early cycles, and introduce a product that we refer to as stabilization. And that allows people to convert your Bitcoin into stable coin at 90.91% LTV to provide you some downside protection. And then even earlier on this year, we've introduced a product called Salt Shield, where you enroll into a fee-based program and liquidations and margin calls are eliminated altogether. And so trying to innovate, in addition with thinking about insurance and other things we want to make available to customers, about how can you look at Bitcoin as a generational asset and not have to worry about the downside and find that added protection. And we have our different preferences on custody and our different preferences on sort of downside protection, all of which are extremely important when you think about a long-term strategy for your assets.
Since this panel is about generational wealth, I want to make sure that each person is taking a step back, considering ultimately what is important to you and what you are trying to build, not just for today, for short-term spending, not just for yourself in 10 years, but zooming out, think about your kids, your grandkids. And I would assume if you're here, having Bitcoin play a role in building that life, that family, that state is going to be important to you. So considering how do I make sure that I retain this asset for myself and into perpetuity for my family, be it through taking loans against your Bitcoin. If it is selling it, make sure you're doing it in a way that makes sense from a tax standpoint, making sure it's guarded correctly within estate planning. And again, zooming out, what is this, who and what is this for? And making sure you're taking a long-term stance on that. So again, when you're looking at lending products, all right, I'm going to use this Bitcoin for this. Maybe it's to go on a vacation with your family. I would hate for anyone here to store Bitcoin and never go on a trip with your family. That'd be a terrible idea. I think if you're on your deathbed, you're not going to say, wow, I have so much Bitcoin for my grandkids that I never got to spend time with. That'd be really foolish. Please take a step back and say, what's important to me? I want to make sure I'm making memories of my family and building a family unit that we're investing in each other. And Bitcoin is a tool to help you be able to invest in your family. So make sure, again, that you articulate not just the tool that you're using, but ultimately what you're building towards, and how can we use this tool in the most efficient and effective way for that thing that you say you value.
What are the pushback that you get from investors? What are, like the key point problem they raise, and how do you address them?
So I think for us, a lot of the conversations we end up having with investors, one is just helping them understand the advantages that they can use to take advantage of in terms of their wealth planning. I mean, it's for a lot of people, borrowing against assets, thinking about that as liquidity, as a way of being very tax efficient. is a new concept, and how do they build it into their financial strategy. The second one is really around custody. How are we protecting their asset? It's not our asset. We do take custody of it to be able to lend against it, but custody and downside protection are two key points that we repeatedly talk to people about and get people comfortable with the different options that are available so that you feel secure in trusting your assets. And I think to the point that was made earlier, encourage anyone to do your own due diligence on any third-party sort of custodian partner that you're working with to ensure that their policies are up to your standards of how you want them to manage your collateral.
Yeah, going back to the point, like, what is the opposition that you faced? Like, we are fighting against a system that has like centuries of inertia. When I launched like Bitsurance, finding a first insurer to take on the risk to underwriting Bitcoin, I talked to virtually every single insurance company in Europe, and most of them laughed in my face and closed doors. And some kept re-inviting me, and I soon learned, hey, you just want free education for your staff, but you're not really interested in insuring Bitcoin. Nowadays, like, thankfully, due to the financialization of Bitcoin, those voices have been much quieter now. Bitcoin is here to stay. People understand it more. Now we have, as first insurer, Liberty Mutual, like one of the largest insurers in the world. The opposition, they are running out of arguments against Bitcoin, is my opinion.
The primary objection I think I get is, isn't Bitcoin too volatile? Maybe it's too new of an asset, or in summary, it's too risky. But we have to allow people to zoom out and understand that there's risk in anything you do. And most people have not stopped to understand that there's risk in owning, in my case, the US dollar. And that risk is opportunity cost, it's a debasement over time, and helping them understand that. And then taking it further than that is, okay, you think that the US dollar is money and Bitcoin is this nascent technology, but we have to define what is money itself. And once we walk them through defining what money is and the characteristics that makes good money, they come to the conclusion on their own that Bitcoin is a superior form of money. And then it's no longer, should I own this thing? It seems too risky, but rather, how much do I own? How do I buy it? How do I store it properly?
Yeah, and I think the fact that Bitcoin gives us optionality, that's really one of the beauty of the assets. Now, obviously, investor can get exposure to Bitcoin in different way or forms. So we talk about buying Bitcoin as raw assets. You can buy ETFs. You could buy a Bitcoin Treasury company. How do you think about these options, and especially when it comes down to building a portfolio? Tell me how you consider them and how different are they?
Well, first of all, I think for all of us that are interested in Bitcoin as a sort of ecosystem, the greater optionality about how to get exposure is great. But it's important that everybody learn the differences. Owning your own Bitcoin, having sort of that self-sovereignty, and having raw Bitcoin in your portfolio gives you a lot of control in terms of what you do with it. I think ETFs are great to draw people in, but be aware of, you don't own it, you own exposure, and there's increasing fees over time as that goes up. And so it's just something to be aware of. And it often will lack, you get tied into a market with ETFs. So it has some portability implications and flexibility. And from a Bitcoin Treasury company, the key point I would make is I do think there's a difference between investing in treasury companies that are owning Bitcoin as their primary strategy. Be leery of potential dilution and other things when they raise funds to buy more Bitcoin, but also look at companies that are acquiring Bitcoin by being a profitable operating company, and that they're buying Bitcoin with their profits and with their revenue, and that would give you a different exposure to Bitcoin in all three different categories.
100%. That's all about sustainability. I think one of the topics of this conference is really how do you build a sustainable Bitcoin treasury strategy. Another topic, but definitely very important. Thank you for bringing it up. Chris.
I agree with all points. Like, you need to have exposure. Like, any portfolio that ignores Bitcoin is like not competing. An ETF gives you exposure. Bitcoin in self-custody gives you the sovereignty. And as you said, like the treasury companies, they can give you leverage, but they introduce so much fragility. You have to really be smart about it. And like there will be like some liquidation or like something will happen. And in the end, as this is a panel on generational wealth, I think, as you said, raw Bitcoin and self-custody, auditability will win out over time and all these things. So like have a little bit of both maybe, but I would always prefer self-custody Bitcoin over the rest.
Yeah, if the foundational value of Bitcoin or any derivative of Bitcoin, be it a proxy company or anything like that, is the Bitcoin itself, I think it'd be strange to not actually just go to the base asset itself and have that be the foundation of your financial portfolio. Of course, there can be places to bring in these proxies in some capacity, but again, you want to build on the foundation of Bitcoin itself. Understanding that, I love, Chris, your verbiage there, that the ETFs can bring exposure, but Bitcoin brings sovereignty, is what you said. So allowing that to be the foundation of the portfolio. And then if you decide, okay, I want some derivative exposure for XYZ reason, again, understanding why you believe that will outperform Bitcoin and the benefits that it might have. It used to be, oh, well, I can take margin against Bitcoin. Now we have products and services that allow you to take loans against it. At least in the States, there are preferential tax treatments for owning Bitcoin versus ETFs. There's not a wash sale rule that applies against stocks or ETFs. So understanding the trade-offs of each of these. With that said, if your parents or your grandma wanted to get exposure to Bitcoin, but she said, there's no way I'm going to go and buy Bitcoin on exchange and put it in cold storage wallet. I'd rather your grandma go and buy an ETF and have some exposure than say, well, grandma, you're not a purist, therefore you shouldn't own this thing at all. That would be silly. So understanding, meeting people where they're at and allowing them to get comfortable over time with adopting this asset.
Yeah, 100%. So last question. If we think Bitcoin we used to say we should get 1 or 2% allocation in your portfolio, then it went up to 5%. And now, if we think about the different assets to build the generational wealth, then you have got real estate, you have got gold, you have got stocks, you have got Bitcoin. In your views, how much Bitcoin you should have in your wealth generational strategy?
0 is the wrong number. I'll start with that. And the key point, one thing for everybody to think about is when you think about building assets, which I think is the real key sort of focal point in terms of building generational wealth, right? Real estate ties you to a country, stocks tie you to a market, Bitcoin doesn't tie you to anything. So there is a lot of hedging that you can do in terms of how you think about the allocation across the different assets that you have in your portfolio and how to manage your wealth towards your goals. I mean, and again, there's short-term and long-term aspects. We have customers that do borrow heavily against their Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin, but it's only on a small percentage of their total holdings and even a smaller percentage of their total sort of wealth portfolio. And so encourage you to talk to a financial advisor, professional, to think about what your strategy could be, because really, we all now have access to the strategies and tactics that the ultra wealthy have been using for centuries. And that is a game changer. Being able to have the utility and the tools to do what we're talking about have never existed before Bitcoin at the scale globally and the ease of entry that it does now. And so just thinking about those options are really important.
Yeah, the 0 is the wrong answer. Somewhere between 1 and 100%, there is the answer. Today, we have these great assets. Like as opposed to gold, you can buy Bitcoin at a spot price for €5 or $5. You get the spot price. With gold, you would have to buy like a couple grams to even reach like that trade. You can Euro cost average for your kids. You can see, okay, currently the block reward is 3.125 Bitcoin, and the entire world is competing like billions of machines and exahash, like it's competing for one block reward. Maybe in 20, 30 years when I want to go to retire and the block reward is like 0.01 Bitcoin, but I can buy for €1,000 now or €10,000 now, that might be enough to retire. Like I think Bitcoin will be around in that future, and that is maybe, a ballpark where you can achieve. But your own stacking goals, they might be different, and Bitcoin is here to improve your life, not you to like raise a number, an imaginary number. Like, think of that first.
We're running short on time, so I'll say this is 2 parts. One, I've never had someone not say to me, I wish I would have bought more Bitcoin. Everyone always says that. I wish I would have bought more. So, maybe anchor into that. And then 2, again, going back to what I said initially, make sure you have Bitcoin in context of your total portfolio where you're not risking it by being maybe over-levered. That's coming from someone who has all of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin. I own my company in Bitcoin. So take that with a grain of salt. But again, make sure you're protecting, again, yourself, your family, and your generational wealth with how you store your financial picture.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.